Hello, we are Amelie, Joana, Josué, and Andrea, and today we're going to talk to you about the socio-environmental conflict in Gibraltar. So for our presentation, we have chosen the city of Gibraltar, a British overseas territory located in the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula, which is home to around 32,000 people. This region was captured from Spain in 1704 by Anglo-Dutch forces and officially ceded to the British under a peace treaty following the War of Spanish Succession. Since then, the region has been a strategically important point because of its position to control the entrance and exit to the Mediterranean Sea through the Strait of Gibraltar, which is only 14.3 kilometers wide. It is precisely because of that the sovereignty of Gibraltar has historically caused tensions in Anglo-Spanish relations, although ultimately Gibraltarians rejected proposals for Spanish sovereignty in the referendums of 1967 and 2002. In fact, Gibraltar only recently officially acquired the status of a city in 2022, which is 180 years after this status was first granted to them by Queen Victoria. Nonetheless, we must say that today Gibraltar maintains close economic and cultural linkages with Spain. It is also important to remark that on the 31st of January of 2020, the UK and Gibraltar officially left the European Union. However, thanks to its links with Spain and the shared territory, in December of 2020, both countries, the UK and Spain, agreed that the UK and the European Union might negotiate terms for Gibraltar to participate in aspects of the Schengen Agreement to facilitate border movements due to its important geographical and economic position. Today, Gibraltar maintains its importance as well as a connected and international city with half of the world's seaborne trade passing through the strait. Furthermore, the city maintains effective and growing connections with improving ports of northern Africa, such as the port of Algeciras, which is less than an hour away, with Europe and obviously with the UK and Spain. Altogether, this facilitates transportation and tourism, which is one of the main components of its economy. Its importance as an international city and strategic city, as well as the historic connection regarding its sovereignty, is the reason why we chose this territory. Therefore, beyond the existing borders, Gibraltar can be considered as a key piece of a vast geographical area that includes Southern Europe and Mediterranean countries, Northern Africa, and the UK, as well as international trade in general that passes through the strait. Gibraltar is only one of 5 recognized British cities outside of the UK, along with Hamilton in Bermuda, Jamestown in St Helena, Douglas in the Isle of Man, and Stanley in the Falklands Islands. According to the Cabinet Office Minister Keith Malthouse, the importance of putting the status of these cities on paper for local people is that it shows its significance for the UK, since they are incredibly rich and with history and culture. Some of these cities also have had some disputes over shared sovereignty, such as in the case of the Falklands between Argentina and the UK, who stresses these territories' right to self-determination. It's also interesting to compare the case of Gibraltar with a very different one, which is the case of Singapore. The truth is that maintaining sovereignty can be vital in today's volatile and uncertain global context, especially for small nations like this one, as it can have a great impact in embracing a common and cohesive sense of identity, economic progress, and local cultures, which is not the case of Gibraltar, because as we've seen, they have opted several times to be kept under British sovereignty. In the case of Singapore, this nation had some disputes with Malaysia regarding the sovereignty of their territorial waters in 2019, which is a dispute that has a broader history going back to 1995, and is what we see here in this picture. Finally, another interesting case is the Eurocity of Tui in the province of Pontevedra, Spain, and Valença do Minho in Portugal, which are since 2022 looking to gain their own juridic personality and a new institutional model to secure their positions to receive European funds. The two cities are united by the International Bridge of Tui since 1886, and on the Iberian border there are 6 more Eurocities that exist, which you can see on screen. And together, through the Manifesto of Iberian Cities, they agreed on current issues and the need to demonstrate an interest in deeper cooperation links in order to restore the citizens' confidence after economic crisis post-COVID-19.
Okay, so I'm Andrea, and we will be talking about the socio-environmental complex in Gibraltar, specifically about the local and international perspectives. So in terms of local perspectives, we divided it into the population and the political parties' point of view. Regards to the population, um, we can see that an overwhelming majority of Gibraltarians wish to remain part of the UK. This position is reflected in the territory's constitution and both the referenda held over the years. Some citizens have expressed concern about Spain's claims to sovereignty over the territory, and many see these claims as a threat to their way of life and their economic prosperity. At the same time, some in Gibraltar believe that a more cooperative relationship with Spain could be beneficial. In recent years, there have been efforts to improve relations between Gibraltar and its Spanish neighbors. Here in this graph, we can see that the data derived from two sovereignty referendums held in Gibraltar. The blue column represents the percentage of votes for British sovereignty, and the green column the voter turnout for both referendums. The first referendum was held in 1967 with a turnout of 96.50% and 99.64% of voters in favor of remaining under British sovereignty. And the second referendum was held in 2002 with a turnout of 87.90% and 98.97% in favor of remaining under British sovereignty. This demonstrates the consistent preference of the Gibraltarian population to remain under British sovereignty, as demonstrated by the overwhelmingly high percentage of votes in favor of this option in both referendums. The high voter turnout in each referendum also highlights the strong engagement of the Gibraltarian population with the issue of sovereignty and their commitment to expressing their opinions through democratic means. However, it is worth noting that the 1967 referendum was not binding, meaning that the UK did not officially recognize it. In terms of political parties, we can say that most of the major political parties in Gibraltar have a similar stance regarding Gibraltar's sovereignty, which is to maintain its status as a British overseas territory. However, there are some differences in their approaches to the issue. Some parties are more open to collaboration with Spain on areas of mutual interest, and others are more resistant to any compromise. The Gibraltar Socialist Labour Party, which is the current ruling party, and Together Gibraltar appear to be the most open to collaboration with Spain. At the same time, the Gibraltar Social Democrats and the Liberal Party of Gibraltar tend to be more resistant to any form of shared sovereignty or collaboration with Spain. Despite their different approaches to the issue of sovereignty, all these political parties and groups share a commitment to the people of Gibraltar and their right to have a say in the territory's future. Okay, so in regards to international perspectives, we decided to divide it into international organizations and other nation states or other countries. When it comes to international organizations, the issue has been raised and discussed in various of them. The United Nations has been involved in the Gibraltar dispute since 1946, when Spain first brought the issue before the UN General Assembly. Since then, the UN has passed several other resolutions on Gibraltar, including Resolution 2429 in 1968, which called on the UK and Spain to respect the human rights of the people of Gibraltar. Following Brexit, the EU has been involved in negotiations between the UK and Spain over the issue of Gibraltar's future relationship with the Union. Moreover, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe has organized meetings between Spain and the UK to promote dialogue and a peaceful resolution to the dispute. Similarly, the Council of Europe has expressed support for promoting dialogue and cooperation between Spain and the UK. Given Gibraltar's UNESCO World Heritage sites have raised concerns about development impacts, the UNESCO World Heritage Committee has been prompted to call for protection measures. Due to its location, the IMO, or the International Maritime Organization, has worked with Spain and the UK to promote maritime safety and address environmental and safety risks in the region. Given Gibraltar's strategic military base, NATO heavily promotes regional security and stability. And finally, as a member of the Commonwealth, Gibraltar has received support from the Association for Peaceful Resolution Efforts. In regards to other nation states, some countries have expressed support for the UK's position on Gibraltar's sovereignty, while others have expressed support for Spain's. However, many countries have remained neutral or have not taken a public position on the matter. The UK's position on Gibraltar has been supported by many of its allies, including the United States, Canada, and Australia, who recognize Gibraltar's right to self-determination and have called on Spain to respect it. On the contrary, other Latin American and African countries have expressed support for Spain's position on Gibraltar. Argentina is one of them, given the parallels with its claims over the Falkland Islands, also known in Argentina as the Malvinas.
Gibraltar's landscape has changed dramatically, particularly through the late 80s and 90s. The reclamation area has perhaps changed most strikingly, from being surrounded by mostly water to mostly land. To prevent and minimize future unfavorable landscape developments, the government of Gibraltar claims it is, quote, committed to placing the environment at the heart of its work. All government decisions are considered for their environmental impact to ensure that they are compatible with our mission, to achieve a low-carbon economy, make Gibraltar as environmentally sustainable as possible, reduce our impact on the planet, and improve quality of life for all, end quote. This has been backed by actions, most notably the management of greenhouse gas emissions, ambitious emissions reduction targets, and the establishment of an independent body called the Climate Change Committee. As mentioned while discussing the sovereignty conflict, sense of place is greatly impacted by Gibraltar's unique geographic situation, influencing it socially, politically, and economically. The Gibraltarian community is diverse and culturally rich, with a distinct cultural heritage and identity. This is evocatively recounted by Benjamin Disraeli, a British Prime Minister during the 19th century, following a visit there. He describes the population as, quote, Moors with costumes as radiant as a rainbow or Eastern melodrama, Jews with gabardines and skull caps, Genoese, Highlanders, and Spanish, end quote. He also notes the existence of a clear rank, with British officers at the top and Jews at the bottom. Gibraltarians are historically proud of their British heritage, and today English is still the only official language, though Spanish is widely spoken and they are largely of Mediterranean appearance. While cultural ties with Spain have been strong and they bear multiple identities, varying degrees as Gibraltarian, British, and European, the Spanish state is not one usually identified with. As a British colony, colonialism influenced all aspects of Gibraltarian life. Intriguingly, it is an anomaly amongst colonies, with inhabitants generally seeking to strengthen ties with the British Crown. Presently, British stance is that, quote, Gibraltar is not a colony and it is completely inappropriate to describe it in this way, end quote, while the UN defines Gibraltar as a, quote, non-autonomous territory that must be subjected to a process of decolonization, end quote. Being a British colony has had its advantages, such as during Franco rule, and disadvantages, like currently with Brexit, for which 96% voted to remain. Historically, international colonialism developments played a significant role in Gibraltar's evolution, exemplified by Britain's loss of North American colonies in 1776, which led to vast trade redirection to new markets in India and the East Indies, favouring a route via Egypt, and so implicating that Gibraltar was the first British port to reach, increasing its trading port role and influence.
Nestled at the eastern mouth of the northern shore of the strait lies the British overseas territory of Gibraltar, occupied in part by a military base. This exceptional makeup of the region represents a potential scenario for crisis, given its subtleties and overlaps, and challenges the limitations of sovereign powers. Leaving aside its significance as a strategic shipping route for the transportation of hydrocarbons, the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula, where three different biogeographic provinces, the Lusitanian, the Mauritanian, and the Mediterranean converge, has a highly unique ecosystem, subject to the environmental directives of the European Union. Those include the Birds Directive that aims to protect all bird species that are naturally occurring in the EU and their wild state, the Habitats Directive aimed at safeguarding natural habitats and rare or threatened plants and animal species, and the Marine Strategic Framework Directive focused on achieving an optimal environmental state in the EU's marine waters. At the national level, Gibraltar is subject to the UK's environmental guidelines, such as the UK Climate Change Act and the Clean Air Strategy, and is also a signatory to a number of international environmental agreements, including the Paris Agreement on Climate Change and the Convention on Biological Diversity. Internationally, Gibraltar is under the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, and subject to the Ramsar Convention to conserve and sustainably exploit wetlands. The marine sector of the region is home to numerous species which fall under the purview of the Council Directive 92/43/EEC of 21 May 1992, concerning the conservation of natural habitats, wildlife, and flora. More than 20 marine species, including turtles and diverse cetacean species, require strict protection, with particular attention devoted to the red coral present along the coast, which confronts severe pressure due to its considerable economic value and illicit fishing practices. In 2017, an investigation into the abundance and biomass of the black spot sea bream present dwindling disclosed that environmental factors such as sea surface temperature and overfishing exerted a significant impact on the species' long-term viability and the preservation of its ecosystem. As an island nation, Gibraltar faces challenges in terms of self-sufficiency for resource management and is subject to several environmental regulations. That implies the necessity of modernizing current practices to conform with the EU directive on waste. Although there is a broad range of waste technologies available, not all are compatible with Gibraltar's scale and specific constraints. Following the closure of the municipal solid waste incinerator in 2000, all municipal waste is now sent to the Sur Europa landfill site in Los Barrios, Spain, where an environmental park utilizing automated separation and sorting processes recovers paper, plastics, and metals from the waste stream. The organic fraction is composed, while residual waste is disposed of in a newly developed landfill. Recycling efforts include locally sorting wood and metal items with a separate recycle center, collecting bulky household items that are then treated or recycled. Various materials are collected for recycling, including batteries, glass, cans, paper, plastic, and small electronic items, which are sorted and sent to recycling plants in Spain for reprocessing into new materials. The primary waste stream in Gibraltar is waste oil, which comprises a mixture of waste oils, water from visiting ships, MOD sources, service stations, and other light industries. Currently, these materials undergo preliminary treatment and water separation at a waste facility for subsequent treatment, regeneration, or disposal. Secondly, clinical waste, which is disposed at EWMS Clinical Waste Incinerator on Europa Advance Road. Other hazardous waste, including military waste, is typically collected and delivered for treatment and or disposal at properly authorized waste facilities in Spain. At the local level, the Gibraltar Environmental Agency is responsible for regulations and guidelines to protect the environment and public health, including the Environmental Protection Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Water Pollution Control Ordinance. The history of water supply in Gibraltar dates back to the Moorish occupation, during which several wells and an aqueduct were constructed. In modern times, the first two multi-stage flash distillers were commissioned in 1984, followed by the expansion of the Waterport desalination plant complex in 1991, to include two reverse osmosis desalination plants, which were decommissioned in 2011. In 2001, Aquagib Ltd. purchased and installed two reverse osmosis plants at Governor's Cottage Camp. However, in July 2022, a fire broke out in the Powers Drive tunnel in Gibraltar, causing damage to the Aquagib reverse osmosis plant and affecting the water supply to the Lower South District and Upper Town. As a result, fresh water was disconnected every evening and seawater was used for toilets in many buildings. This situation lasted for several weeks, leading Gibraltar's authorities to consider the possibility of connecting to Spanish water supply network as a contingency measure, as the territory does not have enough fresh water from natural sources and relies mainly on its catchment capacity. The crisis highlighted the fragility of Gibraltar's water supply and the need for more sustainable solutions.